Today's world is just being filled with so many laws. They're filled with victimless crimes, people being told what they can and can't put in their own body, what technology they can and can't use, what things they can and can't read. We're seeing book bans. We're seeing like all kinds of things go on. And I have very strong feelings about how I want to live my life. It's just a whole maze. And it is a very well-funded industry that has a lot of lobbying powers. So you just don't see scrutiny into what's going on. It's an absolute mess. No one really understands what's going on. There's very little information out there, and there was a giant divide between people who were technically proficient and writing white papers about this stuff and the general public who were kind of left in the dark. I think of the people in the world who have an agenda and who have resources to enact their agenda, and generally involves paying thousands of media outlets to start organically writing about such and such topic. And I've been thinking about this for a while now, like how do we kind of mobilize? Because
there is very little chance that somebody from my audience will not know who you are. But just on that off chance, could you please introduce yourself and say what you do, and just say something about yourself, like your social security number, credit card numbers, and all that good stuff.
Yeah, I'll let you know my first street name, my mother's maiden name, my favorite pet, the first car I ever drove. These are all great interview questions. I'm glad we're doing this.
Yeah, thank you. I'm professional.
Professional, yeah. So my name's Naomi Brockwell. I have a channel that teaches people about privacy. And I kind of stumbled in this world because I realized that I had a very asymmetric relationship with the technology in my life. I read Snowden's book and was like, whoa, there's a lot of stuff going on that, I wasn't aware of. And I just started going into rabbit holes about all of this. I soon realized that no one really understands what's going on. There's very little information out there, and there was a giant divide between people who were technically proficient and writing white papers about this stuff and the general public who weren't reading the white papers and who were kind of left in the dark. They're kind of two camps, right? You have people who are like, of course this has been going on. It's been going on forever. And the other people who are like, I had never heard of this before in my life. And so I really just started implementing a lot of measures in my life. And then it just became a full-time occupation of, okay, well, what can I beef up next? How can I stop data collection in another area? And how can I teach people how I did it? And so, yeah, I was inspired by a lot of other platforms that already exist. Things like Michael Basil. He had a fantastic podcast, which it breaks my heart that he doesn't do it anymore. But, his book is fantastic for anyone who wants a deep dive. I love Darknet Diaries. Things like that just really kind of spurred me on. So now I'm continuing to do this and delving into more and more areas in which our privacy is being compromised, and what, if anything, we can do about it.
That's actually quite amazing, because I've been a long time fan of your channel, and I found that what you do must be very effective with the general audience, which is, at least from my perspective, that's the people that I try to reach. That's why I'm on YouTube myself, and you seem to be really like the way you present yourself and all these complicated topics is just so easy to consume and digest, that I feel like that you're able to bring in that general audience. Is that your goal to reach the normies, or do you want to get to the other technical people so that maybe they use their influence, or what is it that you're trying to achieve with your audience?
Yeah, it's a mix. I find that I have a wide range of audience viewers, judging just from comments that I get. Some people are like, oh my goodness, Google is spying on me. And so they're in the beginner's camp. But then I have a lot of people who will constantly, tell me, hey, you said this thing, you're wrong. I'm a security engineer, here's the correct thing. And I actually love both comments. I learn a bunch from half my audience, and I get a lot of positive feedback from the other half where this information is making a difference. So yeah, I'm on YouTube as well. It's unfortunately the kind of video center of the entire world. And so if we want to reach new people and not just preach to the choir, it's kind of a necessity. It's the reason why I'm on TikTok and Instagram as well, although I don't even remember the last time I actually used either of those apps. But my content is there for those people who do use it. And I started making unique content for that. Before I was just kind of repackaging the long form tutorials and putting it there. No one cared. So then I was like, all right, well, maybe I'll try doing it in a TikTok style. And I just do, I mean, I feel so silly. I put on dumb costumes and wigs and lion outfits, and I do silly voices. And I basically just choose one tiny privacy fact and make a sketch around it. But it's attracted an entirely new demographic. The audience there tends to be young women, which is very interesting. It's complete opposite of my YouTube channel. Yeah. And it just kind of brings home more and more how privacy is for everyone. I get a lot of people who say like, well, I only ever want an audience of people who are extreme privacy people. And I think that stuff's great because that's the type of content that I consume. But we have to realize that everyone has a right to privacy. Not everyone finds privacy accessible. Not everyone finds the tech accessible. And if I can kind of bring as many people as possible along with this message and just get more and more people fighting for privacy, I think that's important. Because I honestly think that there's a giant war going on right now against people's right to live their own lives without interference. And it's scary how pervasive surveillance has become in every corner of our lives. And I think if we can start to renormalize privacy the way it was a couple of decades ago, I think that we're all going to be better off, because I just don't see how we can maintain a free society without the ability to have private interactions, to support causes privately without the entire financial system knowing about it. And there are thousands of partners and affiliates that are all sharing this data of every transaction. I just don't understand how we can, support charities or, meet with people or drive places without everything being tracked. And when we get to this panopticon where every single thing we do is monitored, surveilled, analyzed, put in some permanent record attached to our real world identity, that's a really scary infrastructure. A lot of people seem to be okay with that. They think, well, I like the government, or I like the system of government where I can vote in the person that I choose. And that's all fine and good, but what if that system changes? What if someone gets elected that you don't like? What if someone gets elected who wants to target your demographic? What if the entire government just decides to slowly implement a social credit system, where your everyday activities and how well you toe the mainstream line determines what kind of medical care or grocery stores or hotels or transportation you get access to? Because that's what's going on in China right now. And I'm very worried about the future of normalizing this pervasive surveillance and what this data will eventually be used for, because I ultimately think it's inevitable.
I mean, you're doing such an important work here because you've touched on so many important and crucial issues that are actually happening right now, and so many people are completely oblivious. And I don't blame people, because we should not expect everyone to be uniformly informed about every single issue that is going on out there. But this one is very important. In the case of the United States, now with the Supreme Court decisions repealing certain rules, rights of women are being, especially the privacy rights of women, are being put in jeopardy. There are now laws on, I'm not sure if it's I think it's just on a state level in some states, that are being proposed and passed in some cases, where women would have to register. There would be some like actual databases tracking women's periods, and this would be even doctors asking young girls when was their last period. And then I've seen that some women advise other women or girls to not tell their doctor, which is actually potentially dangerous for their health. But on the other hand, they have to now make these privacy considerations. So it's not just some remote place, like the worst case scenario is China or North Korea or other very dystopian and authoritarian countries, but it's also happening in Western neoliberal democracies. where there's just broadening of police overreach and state powers, and it's it's the potential for abuse on an individual level that can actually like ruin someone's life is just increasing. It's getting worse day by day as we allow these laws to be passed by people who don't even understand the fundamental tech behind it. So I really appreciate,
Yeah, absolutely.
yeah, I totally appreciate what you're doing here, and especially like with the TikTok stuff that you're reaching out young women. Like that's actually probably going to be even more important now, that with the young population being probably the first generation that's not exposed to the pre-internet era.
Right, right. Yeah, and if we go back to just the medical privacy, I mean, that's a whole can of worms. I'm currently working on a piece that dives into medical records and just the data brokerage industry around them. And it's even worse than I realize. I mean, I do this full time. I feel like I should kind of have a good lay of the land and understand what's going on. And then I enter an entirely new industry, start to, dive into research about it. And I'm shocked. It's insane. I had no idea before researching things, and maybe like, call me naive. There are probably people watching your channel who's like, she didn't know this. But honestly, I didn't realize that basically every doctor's office, every psychiatrist's office, every healthcare professional has what's called an EHR, an electronic health record, which was mandated around, I think it's 2009. And it was, the government paid for it all to the tune of billions of dollars. And these electronic health records are mandated. If you don't have one of these electronic health records where you're typing in all the data, then you just don't get access to Medicare rebates and things like that. So there's like a monetary penalty for not using them. And all the data that goes into them just goes into a centralized database to the government. I didn't know this. Like we're answering questions, private questions that we think is, confidential with our psychiatrist or whatever. And all this data is just being siphoned up. So stuff like that, it drives me crazy because it's so opaque. And even trying to uncover it now and trying to interview people who've worked on this and who work on these electronic data exchanges, it's just a whole maze. And it is a very well-funded industry that has a lot of lobbying power, so you just don't see scrutiny into what's going on. It's an absolute mess.
Yeah, it is. It is absolutely a total mess. We assume that there will be good regulation that will be put in place to protect the customer, the user, the citizen, but oftentimes it's just the opposite that's true. Like Google has been...
I've given up. I've given up believing that there's ever going to be, reasonable regulation about any of this stuff. And why is that? Because the government doesn't want you to stop having your data collected, because they're one of the largest clients of data brokers. That's how they do a huge amount of their data collection, because in the United States, we have things like the Fourth Amendment that says, well, if the government wants information about you, they have to get a warrant, or they can buy it from data brokers. And that's kind of their workaround. And so they love the fact that we're voluntarily handing over all of this data, and then they impose stupid things like the third-party doctrine, which say, if you hand your data over to a third party, you no longer have a reasonable expectation of privacy. But that just does not hold water in the digital age, when every single thing we do involves a third party. That does not mean that I've relinquished my expectation of privacy. When I do things in the comfort of my own home, and I think that I'm just, working with an app on my phone, the average person doesn't think, oh, and I'm also broadcasting all this information to the government. There is a reasonable expectation of privacy for so much stuff that we do, but there's just a major issue legislatively in the United States right now where we have not been able to challenge this premise about the third-party doctrine. And so now the government has this workaround with all of our data, and they're just buying it from data brokers, and they have zero incentive to stop this practice, to give any of these companies more than a slap on the wrist when they abuse data, because ultimately the government is benefiting from us all handing it over.
Yeah, the Fourth Amendment is absolutely not very well suited to address the issues of digital surveillance in modern age. It's a negative right,
Yeah.
which means the government should not surveil. It should not breach your privacy in terms of unreasonable search and seizure. That's how it's phrased in the amendment, but it does not apply to when you communicate with someone else and you hand over that communication to a medium. Then they can go to that medium. That's the third party doctrine, as you said there. And I don't think that most people actually like even know that this is a thing. It's not popularized at all. And I think that like when we have these hyper sensationalized cases such as Roe v. Wade, we should have cases like this tied to that as well, because that's the same. That's so adjacent to to all of these other rights that you cannot really enjoy any other right if you don't have full protections, full respect for your privacy. So that's kind of my take. I really love the way you're looking at this. Although I sense that you really hate the position or I guess the concept of government or your disillusion with that.
Well, I just don't see it as the same solution that everyone else seems to. I look around and everyone's kind of looking for the government to save them. Historically, where has the government saved us? The government takes money and then goes and bombs Syria. I mean, I just don't see them really protecting the individual. I see them being more interested in protecting the nation state than the nation's citizens, and often their measures to protect the nation state are at odds with protecting the nation's citizens. So if the government is meant to work for the people, it doesn't seem to be working right now. So I just, I mean, if I can do anything on my channel, it's just to remind people that they do have power in themselves and in their own actions, and a huge amount of their privacy is violated because they're choosing services that are not respecting them. If I can get those people to just start protecting their own data, I mean, we don't really need the government to step in and save all of us if we are, individuals with agency who can make better choices. So for me, it's just about awareness and educating people and saying, hey, there are better platforms out there. There are platforms that aren't collecting this data. There are platforms that are putting this data outside of their own reach. There are data that are going to, companies that are going to protect your privacy in all kinds of ways. As soon as people start to realize how easy it is to switch from Google Chrome to basically any other browser, then hopefully they start to do it. And then we stop feeding the machine that is really being used against us. So I just want to empower people in their own lives. I think that we have more agency than we realize. And so I just kind of want to remind people of that. And I also think it's kind of insidious what's going on with the narrative around privacy, because I see a lot of people feeling disempowered, and I get a lot of comments like, privacy is dead, why should I even bother, they already have all my data, all of that. And that to me reeks of some sort of nefarious psyop. But even if it's not, it's a disempowering message, right? It is basically only working in the favor of those who want to collect your data, because if individuals feel like there's nothing they can do, then they're just going to sit on their hands and continue to allow data to be collected. So I want a countering narrative. I want the message to get out there that, no, actually, the choices you make have a huge impact on the amount of data being collected about you. You know, the government is not putting Pegasus on everyone's phones. The government is doing dragnet capture in the easiest and cheapest possible way by basically taking data from companies like Google, where you're handing over your data voluntarily. So if you just cut off that supply line, you are making a huge impact in the amount of data that is already being collected about you. You know, if you're a targeted individual by a nation state, sure, it's going to be a lot harder for you to protect your privacy, but that's not the conversation I'm having with 6 billion people. I'm having a conversation with people who are being targeted by like all of the mainstream methods, and just reminding them that them being a victim of these mainstream methods is ultimately in their hands. And if they just choose better services, they can cut off like 90% of that data collection. So I think people need to be reminded of that, and we need to I mean, I don't want to. I don't want to say like we need to stop being lazy, because it's time consuming. It's exhausting. I have complete sympathy for people who don't want to take actions, but I also don't want to feed a victim mentality that suggests we're all disempowered, because we're not. We're actually empowered, and if there's something we care about, if we care about the sanctity of a private space in our lives, we should be taking action to protect it.
I mean, in a sense, you're right, because everyone could just install Graphene OS tomorrow and we would all be safer for it. But why hasn't everybody done that yet?
I mean, I get thousands of emails saying, "Hey, Naomi, can I buy one of your graphene phones?" And I'm like, guys, I don't sell graphene phones, but I have a tutorial. You could do it yourself. I think that people are scared. Technology is scary. There is a barrier to entry in understanding it. And technology often doesn't work the first time round. If you're trying to figure stuff out, you know, it can be lonely to go out there and troubleshoot by yourself. And a lot of people may not have the resources in their lives to be able to call up a friend and say, "Hey, my graphene installation didn't work," or "My whatever installation didn't work. Can you help me troubleshoot?" Now, luckily for us, these tools are getting easier and easier to use. I love installing graphene now, and I've done dozens and dozens of these installations because they've made it such a wonderful process with their web interface. So I think it's getting easier and easier for people to switch to privacy products, but I think it's going to be a little bit of a journey to let people know how easy the switch is, because it's always a little scary when we try a new app or introduce a new technology into our lives. So if we can make it as easy as possible and make people feel comfortable taking this leap, I think that more people are kind of going to join the fray. But we have to normalize it. It's still seen as this fringe movement. It's still seen as this thing where only weird people like privacy. It's like, no, guys, like, privacy is normal. We've just been frogs in a pot of boiling water for way too long, and suddenly we think it's okay to hand over every personal detail about us every time we make a transaction. That's not how society should be. It should not be super easy for everyone to collect all of our private activities. So we just need to reframe the conversation, shift that Overton window back towards privacy. And I think it's starting to shift, honestly. I'm seeing headway.
Yeah, there is some for sure. I think there is also a problem with that. More and more young people are just so accustomed to the idea of just sharing everything that they don't have anything else to compare that environment to. For the older generations, it's always easier to say, "Oh, I remember the time before the phones or before the internet," and they have something tangible to touch there. But I feel like that there needs to be a lot more underground collective action, and I feel that the privacy community doesn't really have any grassroots movement. Like Edward Snowden, for instance, could be like easily the leader, but I don't think that he wants to assume that position, which is fine. I respect that, but without that, I feel like that the privacy space is just digital and it's very fragmented. And what you would need is that anytime there is an anti-authoritarian movement, such as a protest or something like that, you need to be able to join those movements with this message and tell people, "Hey, while you're doing this thing of yours, you don't have to really be involved in their cause, but you can spread leaflets or educate them about, hey, if you brought in your phone to this protest, the government is going to collect your unique identifiers. You can tell them about those IDs. It's an IMSI and an IMEI. You can tell them how that correlates to their location through cellular triangulation. So they would have to turn on an airplane mode or use something else. You also have an excellent tutorial about how to use your phone as a Wi-Fi only device. That's a golden piece of information. That's weaponizable, and I don't want to, like, please don't sue me, anyone out there. peace and love to everybody. But what I mean is that
peace and love.
Yeah, exactly. What I mean is that people need to be able to defend themselves, and whenever you don't necessarily have to be present or do anything at the protest. You have this thing called geofence or warrants that any local police department can request from any media or telecommunication company or edge provider. They can request information about your device. They can know that you were there. They can get your contacts. They can get your usage data, other apps that you've installed on your phone. They can get all of that information from Apple, Google, or Facebook and Microsoft and other companies that are involved in what you have on your phone one way or another. And we don't really spend that much attention actually coming to people. Like, we are trying to use these algorithms, which is important. We have to take advantage of that and keep doing that. But I don't know if you agree with me on this proposal at all. But I feel like that we need to have that presence and be known to these movements whenever they go to the streets and teach them. Like, that's just one of the ways that this could actually help people conceptualize this in a more tangible way that connects to their individuality.
Yeah, I actually love that idea. And I've been thinking about this for a while now, like how do we kind of mobilize? Because I think of the people in the world who have an agenda and who have resources to enact their agenda, and generally involves, paying thousands of media outlets to start organically writing about such and such topic, and it's to kind of lay the foundation because they're about to pass legislation about something. I mean, you see this kind of stuff all the time. And for people who are kind of dispersed, like us in the privacy community, and we don't really have resources, and it's such a shame because I would love to be, paying to have blogs put in all the major media outlets to be talking about why we need to preserve privacy. So it's like, well, if we don't have the resources, like, what's the next best thing? We've got a large number of people interested in this stuff. If we had some sort of people taking initiative to say, all right, and I've been playing with like ideas of what this might look like, right? Because I see a lot of bad legislation, for example, being passed when we had 702 up for the reauthorization. I'm tapping away on Twitter saying, everyone, like, we need to call our legislators and fight against this. Like, I wonder, I've been playing with this for my channel. I don't know whether anyone would be interested in this. If you are, let me know, because it's something that I would totally be willing to do. Like, give people weekly homework or something. Say, hey guys, as individuals, we have limited power, but if we all focus our energy on these different things and kind of commit to different projects, we could actually make a huge difference. Like, maybe this week we call up this legislator about this piece of legislation. Maybe this week we, hand out flyers at this protest to teach people about their IMEI, or the other things that you were mentioning. I love that idea of finding actionable things that people can do, and not just doing those actionable things, but trying to create a cohesive community that can get behind that and say, okay, this is something I will support. I will dedicate 10 minutes a week to doing one of these things, and kind of joining this community effort. I think that's kind of a cool idea.
Yeah, I think we definitely need a lot stronger intensity towards collectivization in the privacy community. There is
and I hate that too, because I don't want to be like, hey, we are all part of this single unit, this monolithic entity. We are no longer individuals. But I also definitely see the power in joining forces for a common cause. So if as individuals we want to come together and actually laser focus our resources in a single direction that we can agree on, I think that could be really powerful.
I don't know if I want to reveal this about myself, but I used to be an activist, like, on the ground, and that was for environmental causes. And I didn't really care about who I was talking to and why and why they were there or whatever. I only wanted them to hear me out about a specific cause and a specific issue in a specific area to get a specific thing done, and that was it. And I was basically canvassing for these causes, a couple of them, and they all were successful, obviously by the sheer and pure will of mine alone and nobody else's. But that's what really stuck with me, although I stopped doing that and I focus on other things. But I feel like that has power, because if you really put all of your effort into just one issue at a time, and you approach people at these protests, or you give people homework as you suggested, and you don't necessarily have to find a monolith of a community that is going to agree on all of the issues at all times. You just have to find enough people who are going to be motivated enough to campaign or go out there and be activist about a specific issue. So like when you suggested the calls to the representatives, or was it the Senate? Yeah, it was at the Senate, right?
Well, both, the House, the Senate, whoever's making the decisions.
Yeah, exactly. It's also locally too, and it's things that can also like improve the quality of your life, that can happen like on in your town or municipality, that can also have an impact, like decentralizing your internet network by having smaller providers instead of the big ones that always suck. Like that's a thing that's decided on by cities and councils, not by states or the federal government. So you can engage there too. And I definitely 100% agree with you that we should not strive to be a monolith. That I think was a wrong idea that was present in the privacy community maybe a couple of years ago, when it was just that you're either like with the privacy community or you're just against us because you're radical or you're not useful or something like that. And I was kind of like more of an extremist here, because there were people that were praising Apple for their privacy grandstanding and their marketing campaigns, which on the one hand, that's positive because they're talking about privacy to their users. But on the other hand, that was such an obvious lie that I'm surprised that nobody actually sued Apple for their slogans, like nothing ever leaves your phone, like what happens on your iPhone stays on your iPhone. That's a blatant lie. It's verifiably false. We know that a lot of the stuff, private and personal stuff, is leaving people's devices and it goes to Apple servers, and Apple has access to this stuff. It's not encrypted or end-to-end encrypted. So I'm very much in line with your thought process here. Do you think that this... Yeah, go ahead.
I was just going to say on the Apple topic, I have a love-hate relationship with Apple. So I agree with both points that you brought up. I think that like on net, I'm very grateful for them, because there are very few giant tech companies that have such a global presence that are even bothering to pay privacy lip service. And if we want to change culture, we need to get more people aware of this. And what Apple has done is managed to get a whole bunch of people to buy their devices under the value proposition that they're more private. So already people have started investing in themselves in that way, saying, okay, I'm going to choose this thing that's, it's more secure than stock Android, and they say it's more private. And so I actually really love that they're doing that. And in previous things like San Bernardino, where they refused to put a backdoor into the encryption of the iPhone when the FBI demanded it. I thought that was really awesome, because it was just this big media splash that reminded people that actually it is okay to stand up against requests, even if you're a big tech company and even if the government has the ability to threaten you with antitrust or whatever they want to threaten you with, you can stand your ground and you can be successful. So I think that as a case study, they inspired a lot of people. Now onto the downside, which you mentioned, they collect way too much data about people. It's insane. It's just like, and also, they are more private than a lot of other apps on your phone. Like Apple Maps is more private than Google Maps. But at the end of the day, Apple Maps is still collecting too much data about you. All of these things are just, I think that I completely agree that they're misrepresenting how much privacy people get. I think it's crazy that the OS circumvents VPNs when you have a switch that literally says kill switch, like do not send any data outside of this. And then the OS on both Android and iOS are both like, yeah, I'm just going to send data outside the VPN to our centralized servers. Like, there's a lot of egregious behavior that goes on. I think the solution there is to absolutely keep holding Apple accountable. I think voicing our complaints very loudly, I think they could still be an ally. But honestly, more and more, I'm getting pretty angry at some of their practices. And I don't see any other company stepping up to the plate to kind of take that privacy mantle, which is the scariest thing of this. So I still think that one of the best courses of action is to keep holding Apple accountable and pushing back. Like, for instance, an Apple story for you, just of how angry I am at them. I was looking around for a smart TV, for a television, and I was looking for one that's not smart, and I just can't find one. You just can't get them. And then I buy a TV that seemed like it did not have internet access, and then they shipped me one that did, and I complained, and they say, oh, well, that other one is out of stock, so we sent you a newer version. And I'm like, no, I don't want a newer version. I want one that's not going to connect to the internet. I basically want a dumb monitor, but they wouldn't refund it or anything. It's egregious. So I'm looking around for alternatives, and when it comes down to it, I mean, the Apple TV is a more secure device than a smart TV, for sure. Apple puts a lot more effort into security than your average smart TV that just is egregious and spying on all of us. So then I was like, okay, maybe an Apple TV would work. So I buy one of these devices, right? And I go to set it up, and it's saying, put in your Apple ID. You're not allowed to use this without it. And I'm like, what? Yeah. I can't watch anything without tying it all to this central identity. And that drove me crazy. And I go to, down, I'm like, well, maybe I can use this and I can watch Netflix or whatever. So you go to sign into Netflix, and before you can even get to the sign in or download the Netflix app, Apple TV says you must enter your Apple ID. Tie this to your central identity. And I'm like, God damn it. So then I'm like, all right, I go on my computer, I create a brand new Apple ID. That's all great. I set it up with a burner email. I set it up with a burner phone number. I think I'm all good, right? And then I put it into my Apple TV, and it says, before we can verify this, you need to log into this Apple ID account by signing in on one of your devices, which basically they were saying it was not good enough for me to set this up in the browser, which to start with was really difficult to find. If you want to create an Apple ID and you want to do it through a browser, you got to click through all of these links that take you to links that take you to links. It's really difficult to actually find the Apple ID creation page through a browser. They really want you to just go into your phone in the App Store and type it in, because then they get that device identifier to tie your identity to everything. They really want you to go into your Mac computer and type in and link everything on your device, because again, they get that device identifier. They can tie it to your account, collect a bunch more cohesive information. So I was like, God damn it. They're not even going to let me use this Apple ID that I've set up. They are requiring that I basically dox one of my other devices. So then I'm like, screw it. Maybe I'll just buy a super cheap Mac computer in a store. I will sign in to this Apple ID on that computer. I'll get onto the Apple TV, and then I'll return the computer and never use it again. So this is the kind of workaround you have to think about when using Mac products these days, which is insane for a company that, as you said, bills itself as really caring about privacy. But while that is horrible and I kind of hate them for these kinds of practices, it also was a little bit illuminating. So here's my silver lining on all this. I think that companies are getting lazy with this data collection, and it seems that Apple in particular is relying more and more on you just identifying accounts with your activities. And if you do that, that's kind of how they tie everything together. So one thing that it made me realize is that if we can actually figure out how to avoid tying everything we do to these central unique identifiers and these central accounts, we can probably avoid a huge amount of the data collection that's going on, right? So that was kind of an illuminating moment for me when I just kind of realized how a lot of their data collection must be occurring and what people could potentially do to avoid it.
You are absolutely right there. Linkability and identifiability are going to be the most immediate threats for everyone. Even if they're not targets of any nation state or state-sponsored adversaries. This is basically like every service requires that you identify yourself through multiple means, and they usually go after your phone number and your email address because that is usually tied to some other things that lead to your location. And then goes linkability, which is basically tying every other data point about you, about your usage data, about everything that you do, which is in dozens of thousands per individual. Then they can tie that, as you said, specifically to an identifier that is easy for them to sort through. And for iPhone users and Apple users, that's their Apple ID. And there is plenty of research that has discovered that Apple is collecting your detailed analytics information, even if you specifically toggle those off and opt out of that sharing. And that is like profoundly problematic, because that's actually breaking the trust with the customer, with the user. So I'm really surprised.
It's unacceptable.
It is totally unacceptable. And the way that consent works on these technical platforms is absolutely different from the way people conceptualize consent in relationships. Like, if you told your good friend a secret, it doesn't mean that you trust your friend with the secret to share that secret with whoever they decide to. But that's how it works.
Yeah, it means you can hold your friend accountable if your friend goes and blabs, and there are repercussions, and maybe you destroy that friendship as a result. And there's no accountability with the companies right now. It's crazy.
Exactly. Like, you tell a company a secret and they say, oh, well, we can share this with hundreds of our vendors and third parties. That's how they think about your secrets.
God, yeah. I had like another anecdote. These things happen every day. That's what drives me crazy, is every day I have some kind of a annoying story about how the world is getting less private. So I go to buy some designs of some online graphics thing, where you crowdsource things and you can find artwork, all this stuff. So I sign up, I pay hundreds of dollars to get this design, I expedite it because I'm like, this is something that I need really quick for an upcoming video, this is like 24-hour turnaround. And I pay for it, and I pay for it with my MasterCard, which means that, I put in like whatever name I want, whatever address I want, this masked credit card number. And sometimes companies will automatically flag these services and not let you use them, in which case I just find another service. But this one was fine. The transaction all went through, the money gets deducted from my account, this process begins. And then a few hours later, I get this email that says, please send us your government issued ID and upload it to our platform. And I'm like, first of all, why do I need to give a government ID to buy some drawings off the internet? Like, what? We're honestly normalizing the collection of these like verified identifiers when people are buying thumbnail images or whatever. Like, it's crazy. So already I was like, what are they doing? Then I go to log into my account. They completely blocked me access. They paused my expedited order. And they said, you need to upload your ID. It's going to be a quick process. Just drop it here into this portal. We'll verify it. And a few things made me angry about this situation. First of all, they don't need my ID to verify this purchase because the money was already deducted from my account, which means that the purchase went through fine. So this is just additional stuff they want on their end. And they're expecting me to hand over my license with my home address and my photo and my personal details into some centralized database where there's zero accountability about how they're going to protect it. And as soon as there's a data breach and that gets leaked all over the dark web, there's going to be no repercussion for this company. So there's zero downside for them to be demanding it. And they could probably, make some money off it, create this profile for you, linking things and maybe even buying data about you as well so that they can see what kinds of things you like so that then they can target you with advertising. Like, it's this whole insidious mess, right? So in the end, when they got that email, I was just like, screw it. So I just responded again through this email alias, and I just said, I have no intention of giving you my government ID. Please refund my my money immediately. So they refunded it. And that's kind of the state of things right now. We're just like, the only choice sometimes is just for us to be discerning about which services we use. I ended up using a different service, gave me no hassle. Again, could use all of the privacy tools that make me comfortable doing transactions online. So I think we just need to be more judicious about the companies we give our business to. And with the power of the dollar, just boycott those that don't align with our values, and we can make an impact if we start to be discerning about the good companies versus the bad companies, and those that enable privacy practices and respect them, and those that disrespect their users.
Yeah, that's oftentimes the only solution. I get people asking me, well, how do you resolve the telecommunication privacy issue? How do you solve that? The cellular triangulation and all that stuff. Is there a secret way to secure it? Wink, wink. And I say, I don't use it. That's the only solution. and they're like, what? You don't have cell on your phone? That's not like, what are you doing? It's just a brick. No. I'm like, well, I download my podcast and then I walk out of my home, and that's how I roll, right? Or I don't have a TV specifically for this reason. I don't have any other I don't have any other social media accounts outside of my main YouTube channel. And when I consume YouTube, it's through NewPipe. So I'm
Great.
not even.
I love that.
Yeah. But the way I do this is, I understand not suitable for a lot of people who have social life. I'm kind of an awkward person in that aspect, so I don't feel.
Aren't we all?
Yeah, maybe. Yeah, I don't feel that
we'll
much
create
pain.
the awkward privacy club. I invite you into my awkward privacy club. You can be president. We invite the entire community into it. We'll all be awkward together.
That would actually be pretty amazing. Yeah, I would love that, because that's if there's one thing that I'm good at, it's being awkward, and it's very painful.
I love it. I love it. Yeah, no, my television, because you said you didn't even have a television. So maybe I'll do a video on this actually. It's not a terrible idea, because there are very few options. Ultimately, Apple is way too difficult to be private these days, because now, they didn't before, like a few years ago, they didn't mandate that you put in your ID in order to download the Disney app or whatever it is you want. But now they do. So it's just becoming more of an issue. Honestly, and I've looked around for dumb monitors, and you can get monitors, but they're not large. And a lot of people like large TVs today, so I haven't found a solution there. The best solution I've come up with is get a projector, because projectors are not yet smart, or you can get a dumb projector that literally is just a light bulb and a fan. You connect it with an HDMI to your laptop. You can do your streaming through a sandbox browser on your laptop, or download things, or whatever you want to do. I found that to be the most privacy preserving way to watch content now. So if anyone wants to try that out instead of getting an egregiously invasive smart TV, that could be an option for you.
Yeah, in a way, that's kind of how I watch TV. It's just a screen that's disconnected. It has no cables other than the juice, and then I just plug in my USB drive and play movies from there. And I'm not gonna mention how I got those movies on that drive.
No, don't mention it. Although I have a question for you, because this is something I'm playing with right now.
Okay.
So when I read Snowden's book, I was like, God damn, the government's already trying to censor this book, and they're trying to ban it, and they're suing him and freezing all of the profits. And so I was very careful to buy a paper copy, because I'm like, listen, I don't know what information they're going to change in it if I buy a Kindle version or whatever. So I would rather just have something so that I have kind of that historical record. And so books, if it's an important book these days, I like to buy a hard copy. And it was only recently that, and it shouldn't have been recently, I am hitting myself for only just thinking of this, but obviously movies are gonna start to be altered as well. And especially as AI technology is getting easier and easier to alter things, I think that we're probably going to see a slew of movies kind of get revisited, and questionable content removed and erased from history. So when you're talking about plugging in your hard drive that has his movies downloaded, I actually think that's a pretty great idea. Maybe we'll see a resurgence in an era of, torrents or DVDs or whatever else to actually have a physical copy of a movie instead of just kind of renting it or buying it, but it lives in a cloud that we don't have control over. I think it's something worth looking at. But is that something that you're thinking of? Like maybe my tinfoil hat is getting a little too large, but I'm thinking of kind of the future of censorship and the direction we're heading in, and starting to wonder what kind of precautions I can take.
I don't think you're wearing any tinfoil hat at all, because that's already happening. If you go to Disney Plus, whatever, I don't know what's called, but I've watched Deadpool the movie, the first one, through the Disney Plus, and that was with a friend. And I was really looking forward to certain scenes that I knew were funny because I watched them, I think in the theater, and I remember them differently. And then in the Disney Plus stream, those scenes were altered. Their text was different, and then I thought, oh, that's strange. Then we watched another controversial movie called Aladdin, or no, it's called Dictator, and the dictator's name is Aladdin. It's by Sacha Baron Cohen. And that movie has like visibly different lines. Like there's one line when Aladdin first comes to the United States, and the first thing he says that, America, the birthplace of AIDS. And they deleted that from the movie in the stream. Wow. Yeah, and I was like, oh my God, but it was a controversial line. It probably did not live up to its moment, but like, come on, man, like don't change that. And they do change that. Like they've been doing this with one of those older movies that used to be pretty racist. And I'm like you can, if you don't want to, expose people to that sensitive content, like I can understand that. But on the other hand, you're also harming the veracity of that era. And you're kind of like whitewashing it. You're making it look a lot better than it actually was. And we need to like keep in mind that that progress needed to happen in order for those bad things that we used to be doing not happen anymore. And it wasn't that long ago. Like people still live today that era that they were born in that era. So like you're absolutely right. This is happening with games, with movies, with music. It's happening with every piece of media. It's like with Joe Rogan's podcast when he went to Spotify. I hate him for it. He's dead to me now, and that's because like he went exclusively to Spotify from a platform that is like one of the very few last standing beacons of the decentralized internet, like the podcast RSS. And he just decided to leave it all behind for $200 million. Like I don't know. Like I hope he falls on his own knife. No, I wish peace and love on everyone. I'm sorry, I shouldn't have said
peace
that.
Peace and love, everyone.
Yeah, but that's
I had a really weird experience the other day, like when we're talking about preserving historical records, which is getting more and more important in this age where everything, as you said, can be whitewashed or altered, or, the collective memory, digital memory is kind of changed. I was writing a piece about CBDCs the other day, and I remembered a politician in the UK talk about how this could be a tool for basically controlling how people spend their money. So people would get welfare checks and the government would be able to program into the money how they could spend it. You're not allowed to spend it on anything that we deem not good, and we're going to make that choice for you. And so that was kind of something I wanted to work into this video. It's like, okay, well, this will be an item for control, and we really can't foresee what kind of control is going to be used for. I start looking for this quote, and I work in the news industry, so I'm reporting about this stuff. So I had a pretty strong memory of reporting on this in the past. And I'm looking through, and I can't find a single reference online. And I'm searching, and I'm asking the internet, like, hey guys, do you vaguely remember this? And people are like, yeah, I might vaguely remember that. And so I'm looking, and I'm looking. And to no avail. Like, Google is failing me. I'm looking on YouTube. I find a potential stream, but I'm like, oh, that's weird. It's not accessible. I could have sworn that I actually saw this clip before. Anyway, I went to a couple of AI models, which were all trained on data from a couple of years ago. And I asked the AI, hey, there's a politician in the UK, I'm pretty sure it was such and such, who was saying this. Can you find any record of this? And all the AI models came back and said, yeah, he said it at such and such conference and this year and all this. And they basically all confirmed that it did actually happen. But there's no reference to it. There's no news articles. There's nothing on the internet. And it dawned on me, I'm like, God damn, we are starting to see the erasure of our historical record, where politicians say something, it turns out that, oh, maybe I said the quiet part out loud, let's scrub it from the internet, and all collective memory disappears. And it's only because these AI models were trained on older data, had access to things probably before it was scrubbed, that I actually had it confirmed that, no, I wasn't going crazy. This did exist. It did happen. It's just that all record of it had been expunged. So that's something that I think people should kind of be aware of as well.
I mean, you're touching on a very intriguing subject here, because that's very, very relevant now with AI junk flooding the internet. And that is a very real concern for the AI itself, because artificial intelligence needs to be trained on quality data. It's not enough to just have a lot of data. And what happens there is that if you have images that the AI is being trained on, and a lot of those images then that are generated by AI re-enter the training pool, it is actually poisonous for the model itself, and that can result in a deterioration or a model collapse. So this is actually going against the notion that AI will linearly or exponentially improve. That's absolutely not the case. And with this realization, there is now a hunt to scrub all of the pre-AI era data, so that they actually like freeze this essential pool of information that was not poisoned by AI generated stuff. And that's relevant not just for the AI researchers, but also for us, because as you imagine, with this collective memory, like erasing information, they can also insert artificial information. That's
absolutely,
that is absolutely going to be happening. That is something that's going to be picked up, and then it is going to be a lot more difficult as we progress with this AI generated content to discern what actually happened and what didn't. And if you just wanted to decide that based on a search through a search engine, you would struggle, just like you did with this scenario, because you would not be able to find a conclusive argument as to whether that actually happened or not. And an absence of evidence would not be evidence of absence, and we would just have to just polarize into camps and just stick to that. That's what I'm afraid could happen. So you're absolutely right here, and it touches back on what you touched with the altered media that goes, like, for example, with games as well. Like, it's impossible to basically play games on, or get games, not play, but get games that were older. And the only way to get them legally, I mean, not legally, but like to get them to play them on your hardware is if you crack those games, which is not necessarily legal. But those companies are no longer interested in offering them to you or maintaining them, and they don't have to maintain them if they don't want to, but like people should still be able to access them and have them in their library if they want to. But that's gradually being erased out of the option that people are being offered. Now more and more studios are pushing for this idea. This is also happening with the streaming services, polarizing content and fragmenting it into different locked-in gardens and ecosystems. It is a lot. I think you're right there. It is going to be a lot more difficult to get your hands on on genuine content, authenticity, and you're going to have to be just as vigilant as you are about privacy, about these endeavors to get real information, real data, real content, real media.
Yeah, I have an interesting and probably controversial take on AI with regard to privacy. So a lot of people are very concerned about AI because companies are knowing more and more about us, and it's it's difficult for individuals to protect themselves, and it gets increasingly difficult for people to protect themselves. And I actually think that like we're kind of projecting into this future where AI is going to be so powerful that it'll know our every innermost thought and all of this. But actually, I think we're already there. I think that data brokers know intimate details about us. Like I was just chatting to a guy who used to work for a particular financial services company that I won't mention the name of, but he was telling me how 20 years ago they were buying data sets and correlating them so that they could figure out people's cell location data and then correlate it with purchases and then use that to target people with advertising and sell it and all this. This was happening 20 years ago. Today, it's egregious how much information is being collected about us. So I think we're already at the stage where these companies and governments know so much about us and people haven't quite caught up and realized it. So they're worried about this thing happening in the future because of AI. No. We're already there. And actually, I think that AI is possibly the only thing that's going to help us. Like, yes, we are entering a world where we are going to find it very difficult to tell fact from fiction, know what's real and what's a deep fake. But actually, for a privacy conscious person, we could use this to our advantage because there's going to come a time where we're going to be able to generate so much noise about us that I think the entire data brokerage industry is going to become obsolete. If they can no longer make a living selling verifiable data, I just don't think they're going to exist. And our ability to just on a massive scale for the individual to finally have the power to just generate all of this noise and misdirection, I think that's going to be an incredibly powerful tool, especially as surveillance gets more and more invasive into our lives. Governments and corporations do learn more about us. And so if we can have these machines running, just generating all of this stuff, it's going to be super difficult to actually figure out what's going on. And that may be one of our greatest weapons. Like, I think that AI is going to be ultimately a great democratizer. And the darkest path is one where only governments have control of this power. If we put this power in institutions that we have granted a moral sanction to have a monopoly on the use of force, that's giant power tools all in centralized hands, and that has a big danger of being abused. But if we can balance that centralization of force by giving individuals powerful tools that they could use to protect themselves, I think that could be a possible salvation. I'm kind of excited about what that world's going to look like. And I'm not trying to say that there aren't dangers of all of this stuff, things to worry about. There absolutely are. I'm not discounting all of that. But I also think there are upsides. And given that we're heading towards this future and it's inevitable, let's focus on the upsides and let's actually look at how we can use these tools and use technology to our advantage to protect our rights and not just see them be decimated.
I think you're pretty much 100% right there. Although I would have to take at least 1 percentage point off of that because I
no, not 1 percentage point.
Yeah, because for now, or at least from the efforts that I've seen, introducing noise as a method of privacy protection, that's actually a real strategy. But it's from like introducing noise into your web traffic, that's discernible. From what I've seen, and it's like you would have like a bot randomly browsing the web, and that way, like even if you do not use a VPN service, you would still be protected because the adversary observing your traffic would not be able to differentiate between genuine traffic and and the noise. But it turns out that it's not that difficult to discern that. And with AI becoming more advanced, maybe it could be the case that it's gonna just introduce so much poison into the data that simply looking at it with our currently available analysis tools would not be helpful anymore. And I totally agree with you that people should have access to this technology. The only way people can actually have access is if artificial intelligence is open source. And I'm working on videos trying to remind people that there is this massive push, a multi-billion-dollar lobbying effort that is actually and very proactively trying to prevent open source AI from existing. And they're pushing governments in the US, Canada, UK, in the European Union, and elsewhere in the world, trying to enact laws or executive orders to make it so that open source developers, or all developers really, but this would be punishing small teams most, that would be held liable for any potential abusive use of their model, which means that if you're a small development team of an open source AI model, you don't have billions of dollars at your disposal to throw at litigations. You cannot even afford another team to make sure that you actually oblige by all the requirements and regulations. And companies that are lobbying for this regime, which they want strict licensing to be enforced in a way that if you wanted to create a model, you would have to register with a government body, with an authority, and seek permission from the authority.
God.
Yeah, and it's very likely that will pass, but there is a counter effort. So the effort to push for this licensing regime and to prevent open source from happening is coming from OpenAI, from Microsoft, Google, and from a billionaire philanthropy called Open Philanthropy. And these are people that left Facebook a couple of years ago. Like more than a decade ago, I guess. And then they're using their billions to basically propagate their own issues and causes. And one of them is this thing. And they're doing this on the grounds that AI is an extinction threat, and you cannot allow people to have AI because they would develop nukes out of AI and hence destroy the world. There is no evidence for any of that, but that doesn't really matter. What matters is that we need to have open source because that's what makes the world safer. That's what makes the technology more accountable. We can have public access, scrutiny we can see. So there are absolutely benefits that allow for transparency that make AI safer, not what they're trying to argue is that if you give people just free access to the AI, they would just lose their mind and go crazy. Obviously you're always going to have bad actors, but the thing is that proprietary AI is not safer in any measure than open source AI or open source software. And we need to acknowledge that reality, that if we have more eyes on the stuff, then more good actors will be able to find that stuff and prevent bad actors from doing bad things. So that's a very nuanced issue, I guess. But there is like a
I completely agree.
Yeah, and there is now a counter initiative from the Mozilla Foundation and plenty of other people, a lot of people from Meta, the parent company of Facebook, that are signing into this counter initiative, and they are arguing for open source AI. Mark Zuckerberg himself is very passionately arguing for open source AI because they're also benefiting from it with their business, because everyone benefits. It's like they've been kind of late to the game, Facebook was, or Meta was, so they can actually benefit from all the community research and make their own models better on a lot cheaper basis than these massive proprietary models of Google Gemini or ChatGPT from OpenAI. So that's absolutely the thing, and I'm very glad that you're so passionate about artificial intelligence being used for good, for empowering the individual. And I think we need to really bump up our efforts to educate and agitate people that they really need to care about this.
Yeah, I completely agree. And it is scary how much lobbying money, as you mentioned, is going towards rent seeking and basically carving out a moat for all of these giant corporations who basically want to protect their own industry and stop competitors coming into the ring. I mean, it's just an age-old story, right? It's what we've seen with all kinds of occupational licensing throughout history, or even in Prohibition era, where you use government force to enact laws that are going to help your business thrive at the expense of competition. And it's that old story of the bootlegger and the Baptist. It's that unlikely coalition, the unlikely bedfellows, and we're definitely seeing that in the AI movement right now. In the bootlegger and the Baptist, the idea is that these were two people types of people who you'd think would be polar opposites on different issues, but in the Prohibition era, actually, they joined forces because it was mutually beneficial, because you had the Baptists who were saying, oh, well, we want to outlaw alcohol because religious reasons and purity and all of that. And then you had the bootleggers who would kind of co-opt this narrative and say, yeah, that's definitely why we want to ban alcohol. But meanwhile, their actual incentive was they were making a ton of money because they were bootleggers. Because if the government keeps it outlawed, they can keep their giant underground industry going. And so what we're seeing, I mean, we've seen it over and over. If you had these unlikely bedfellows, these unlikely alliances, and the current one in AI is you have, I mean, the analogy with the Baptists would be you have these purists who are saying AI is going to kill us all, these doomers like the AE movement, who are basically saying we're all going to die, therefore we need to stop all progress right now, and we need licenses, and we need government intervention, and we need to put controls in place, and we need to have government agencies set up to verify that people are doing this safely. And then you have these giant corporations who would probably be the bootleggers in this situation, saying, yeah, we definitely, it's a threat. Let's do that. And let's have those licenses. And only really the established players should get them, because they're the ones that really know what they're doing. And we don't want this technology to get into everyone's hands. So let's put those controls in place. And actually, let's set up an advisory board. And us corporations will all have seats at the table to advise this industry in the best possible direction to make sure it's safe. So you have corporations coming in, co-opting this narrative, and riding on the coattails of this doomerism in order to essentially carve out a moat for themselves and their industries. And I think that it's very scary because they're amplifying this doomerist narrative in a way that makes everyone scared. And when people are scared, they behave irrationally, they pass overreaching laws, they do things like enact the Patriot Act because they're scrambling to do something and they don't know what. And so all of these overreaching and egregious surveillance laws and controls and things like that get put in place. I think we're seeing a similar thing happen right now where people are scrambling to enact bad policies, and really the only winners of this are going to be the people with a seat at the table. So that's going to be government agencies who are going to get access to this technology, and that's going to be big corporations who have a vested interest in it. So we need to absolutely fight back against those narratives, and we need to also present the counter argument. And I think you hit the nail on the head when you're saying that this is a tool for countering all of the bad people, and the best way that we can use AI for a safe future is to have people invest in this technology and experimenting with it, so that if there are bad AI models out there, we can be also simultaneously developing good AI models that could counterbalance them. And this is something I actually had a meeting with Jen Easterly a few months ago, who is the director of CISA, which is this government organization that is basically tasked with protecting businesses from hacks and breaches and all of that. But they started talking about AI in this meeting, and she was saying how she really wants the government to clamp down on AI and put controls in place and all of this. So I brought up the point that, even if we enact clampdowns in the US, the people that they're most worried about abusing this are state actors in Russia and China and North Korea. No amount of US law clamping down on this technology is going to stop any of these bad actors. So given that any controls that governments in America put in place to curtail this technology, given that they're going to be completely ineffective against the people that they're most scared of, what is the best course of action? Where should they best be putting their resources? And so they're thinking about, well, let's put our resources into clamping down and controls and, enforcing these controls. So I made the point and said, like, it's not going to work. So wouldn't your efforts be best put into developing AI that can really robustly protect industry and help them patch vulnerabilities and clamp down and protect themselves? Shouldn't your entire strategy be entirely defensive? And it's just not something people are looking at, like this potential for this technology to be used for good, for defensive measures, for curing cancer, but also for protecting our systems, protecting our privacy. Like, we could be investing in all of this in a way that it really works for individual prosperity and individual freedom and individual safety. And instead, we're thinking about putting basically a gate in the middle of an open field and putting all of our effort into maintaining that gate, knowing full well that the entire world is just going to walk around the gate. Like, it's just kind of crazy to me how in denial people are at the moment, and just coming up with these silly strategies that are clearly not going to do anything, but they just like it because they like the control element.
Yeah, They really like the idea to be the only players in the market, because that what's generate most shareholder value, and nobody wants to give up their top position. That's their incumbents, the big tech is, and they want to make sure that this new market is completely captured by them. It's very economically rational for them, but it's completely disastrous for everyone else. If you just take the job market into consideration, if you imagine that the workers would not be allowed to make their own AI and compete with the big tech incumbents, they would be left at their basically at like what's the expression, at their I'm blanking on it for some reason. It's the word.
At their beck and call. Left
at their... Yeah, it's a word, I think, that starts with a W, but I'm not entirely sure.
Whim.
Yes, that's the one. I was thinking of wit, but that's not good. Yeah. So at their whim, basically, because you are going to have people that are going to be losing their job, but that's not going to be because of AI, but because of ownership of AI. Because if people and workers are allowed to own their own AI and have it open source and make modifications to it in a way that boosts their own productivity, then yes, they can compete with the proprietary proposition. But then they don't want that. The big tech does not want that competition, so they're doing everything they can, using all of those lobbying means at their disposal to make sure to kill their competition before it even has a chance to arise. And that's what we need to put into perspective, that yes, if you give good technology to everyone, you're always going to find bad apples that are going to abuse that. But we already have plenty of laws that punish bad behavior. We can make more laws that do punish bad behavior. Like, let's say if somebody makes explicit content off of other people's likeness, we can make that illegal, right? But that does not mean that we just put a ban hammer on all of open source AI just because some freaks out there make something that's genuinely uncomfortable. And there's always going to be bad actors, and we should be going after those bad actors with everything that we have, but we should not be punishing the society as a whole and every other individual collectively because of those bad actors. We need to also contrast that with the alternative, when we allow that prohibition of open source AI. And imagine that this is going to be very much like the prohibition of alcohol, probably even worse, because you're going to have AI production centralized within just a handful of the biggest companies, who are gonna pay no regard to basically the rest of the world. And you could easily imagine a scenario where in a couple of decades from now, dozens of millions of people will be displaced out of the market, not be able to return on basically annual basis, reaching like easily like quarter of the population, perhaps even more, that will not be able to return to the market, and it'll be very bad for those people, very unfortunate. And I think the only way to prevent a future that is as dystopian as this is to just give everyone access. So I think that should be the main talking point here. And it is absolutely essential that we fight like hell for these issues, and I'm not entirely sure that we are. I don't really see that much effort, but that was also the case like with until Snowden came in. We didn't really have that much privacy effort either. So I don't know what needs to happen in order for that thing to spiral into a movement that has weight. But I don't know, if you have any suggestions, feel free to lay them out.
Right. I mean, you're absolutely right. Like, we've gotten into this habit of demonizing the technology rather than demonizing the criminals. And I think
Yeah,
law
exactly.
enforcement's gotten lazy in going after technology. They go after the movement of money instead of the actual crime that took place, where the money came from. And it's just kind of the conflation of the two. We demonize mixing services instead of, and demonize privacy tools instead of actually going after the criminals who are trying to use those tools. And like when we start sanctioning technology, it's absolutely insane. Technology is neutral, technology can be used for anything, and to demonize it, to sanction it, to enact prohibition is just a terrible, terrible mistake, because that technology is used for both bad and good, and all of the people who are using it for good lose out, and all the innocent people get targeted as a result. I think that, like, looking into movements like I think it's Alliance for the Future is an organization that is just very new, and they're starting to push back against some of these lobbyists who are trying to control AI. So looking at organizations like that, I know that they're fundraising right now. I would just keep an eye out for different civil liberties organizations that are really pushing to keep this technology free, and try to push back against this narrative. I mean, it's very easy for culture to fall into the trap of hearing a doomerist argument and then just adhering to it religiously. We tend to parrot these things like, well, I heard that anyone will be able to make their own biological weapon from this thing. We just kind of latch on to these anecdotes that we hear. And I think we really need to start pushing back against this. There are some great debates out there. For example, Yudkowsky versus Hotz is a great debate where Hotz is kind of holding Yudkowsky's feet to the fire about these AI doomerist predictions and saying, logically, let's actually walk through them. Let's talk about the timeline for when this will happen. Is this a timeline that it's like FOOM, where it happens immediately and this thing spirals out of control? And they kind of agree, well, no, that wouldn't happen. It's like, right. So if that's not going to happen, don't you think that we'd be able to deal with threats as they come and start to create protections as we go? This isn't something where we need to cordon off an entire industry in its infancy. And so it's just a really, like, understanding debates like that and actually getting into the arguments is a great way to just educate ourselves. But once we have that foundation, we can start pushing back. And when we do see legislation being passed, voicing your opinion is important. I was once told by a sitting congressman that the best way to get your opinion heard is not to send an email, because they can literally just bulk delete emails. But if you call, and even if they don't pick up, which they rarely do, if you leave a message, they have to listen to the message. So if you think about 1 million people calling someone's office and all leaving, a minute-long message voicing their disapproval, and some staffer has to sit through all of those messages, that's the type of stuff that actually does make an impact. It doesn't make as big an impact as I would like, but it's one of the only tools we have. So I would encourage people to take advantage of tools like that. and be voicing their disapproval, being very loud about this stuff. Currently, the loudest people are the doomerists, so the people who have the scary narrative that scares people into complacency or into wanting to stop this technology. Scary arguments get attention. If it bleeds, it leads, as they say. People fall into the trap of just kind of buying these scary narratives because we're biologically programmed to be aware of threats and to really overreact as a survival mechanism. But right now that's being used to our detriment and is possibly creating the darkest possible timeline where our reactionary and doomerism could potentially put this technology only in the hands of very, very powerful entities that already have a lot of control over our lives. We don't want to fuel that centralization of power. We want to decentralize power, give it back to individuals, because I think that the scales have been tipping too far in one direction for a long time. So I do think that you're absolutely right. This is an important fight that we should all be jumping on.
Yeah, I agree with every single word that you said there, I think. But
there's no 1% that you're like, wait, I've got this 1% discrepancy. Let's dive into it.
No, I agree with you. It's just that I often am a very negative person, and I don't want to be that person. And for this specific segment that you laid out, I had nothing to say against it. It was just that one before that I haven't really seen evidence of noise being successful as a privacy mitigation or as a mitigation tool against these privacy threats. Although it is a strategy that is absolutely applicable here. But like with this stuff, I agree totally. You said that you wanted to cap this convo at 1.5 hours, so I am going to respect that. I would love to continue at some point if you're down. If not, then I'm still going to enjoy your content. I think you're doing tremendous work. And I wanted to ask you one last question, since you're not going to give us your residential address, unfortunately. It was a very critical piece of data point that we still don't have. What is your worldview? Where do you get your ideas from?
I
mean, you don't have to answer that question.
That's a great question. I would say really from first principles. And it's hard. I mean, it's hard for us to know what influenced us at a young age to send us in a certain direction. But I do believe, we have this one life, and I think it's sacred. And it hurts me no end to see people's one chance at living and experiencing whatever this thing is be controlled by other people for other people's interests. I like to see the amount of freedom an individual has be maximized just out of principle, because I think it's beautiful. I think life is a beautiful thing. I want to see people go and explore and build and create, and not be at the whim of someone else's value system, not to see other people's ideas be imposed onto them. So I think I really come at this from like a freedom angle. And that's not to say I think everyone should just run rampant and be able to do what they want. Like, I very much adhere to the non-aggression principle, where if there's any kind of foundation in society that we should agree on, that I think is a good thing to agree on, it's don't hurt people, don't take their stuff. But outside of that, I currently see today's world as just being filled with so many laws that just they're filled with victimless crimes, people being told what they can and can't put in their own body, people being told like different choices, like what technology they can and can't use, what things they can and can't read. We're seeing book bans, we're seeing like all kinds of things go on. And I'm someone who I have very strong feelings about how I want to live my life. I have a very strong internal value system. And at the same time, I don't think I have the right to impose that on anyone. I just don't think that anyone has the right to impose their own value system on anyone. So when we have a structure where certain powerful people can have their own value system and impose it on anyone else, I just think that's wrong. I think that individuals should have the right to voluntarily enter into contracts with other people, live in societies where they can determine their own rules. And I see the current situation as being problematic to achieving those ends. I mean, I'm an immigrant into America. I am an immigrant from a country that's very friendly with America. I come from Australia. So, it should by all means be easy for me to have left my country and moved to another one. But I can tell you it was incredibly difficult and cost a ton of money. And, I managed to succeed because I happened to be very fortunate and was able to make that transition. So when people say, yeah, we have freedom, just if you don't like it, leave. If you don't like it, go to another country. And those people don't understand how difficult it is. So I'm kind of tired of seeing a world where our choices are being curtailed. There's no easy out for people to just kind of live the life on their terms. And I want to see the balance of power be directed back towards the individual instead of continually moving in the direction of centralization. So I don't know if that answers your question, but I feel like everything that I stand for kind of derives from just like an individual's right to live their life on their own terms, as long as they don't hurt other people.
I totally respect that. It does answer my question. It was very beautiful. I'm not entirely sure where I stand on every single aspect of that idea, because it's kind of like everything has a limit, and in my opinion, or kind of like my realization, there are no absolutes. So not even the individual is an absolute, but we don't have to get into that. That's a philosophical debate.
That'll be for the next discussion.
That would be pretty great. Yeah, it's just I find it very fascinating to see why people do what they do, because like you have these accusations being thrown at others left and right. Oh, they are doing it just for the money, and they are doing it because they are a grifter. They don't really believe in what they're doing. And there are definitely people like that.
I wish there were money in what I'm doing. I run a nonprofit. We scrounge for donations. So if anyone wants to support privacy, feel free to donate. But no, it's as a journalist in the nonprofit world, it's definitely less money than I might be making if I were just collecting sponsors and doing some other kind of show that was more popular. I'm not sure privacy is a particularly popular topic.
Yeah, exactly. It's not the money that you do it for. And I wanted to know what it was for you, what drives you. And it obviously takes a lot more to get to know a person like that, but I just wanted to know your thought process. I literally made I think less than $200 off of YouTube ad revenue for the entire last month, and the rest of my income is just my Patreon revenue. I don't have any sponsors, which really sucks.
Yeah,
and I could have sponsors.
Hard.
Yeah, I mean, it's just I like shooting myself in my feet and knees and everything else that helps me move, because I have principles too that are very, very strong, and that's like one of the reasons I don't have any other account other than YouTube, even though I'm now inspired to open up a TikTok account, because I'd like to reach a lot of that younger audience and female audience too, because on YouTube it's insane. Like 93% of my audience is just male, and I find it to be incredibly stupid, because if anything, it like I could get if it's like 40-60. But I think more female audience should be engaged in this kind of content, because they're usually the primary victim when things go wrong with regards to privacy. And for women, that happens like in places that men, who are oftentimes developers and leaders of these projects that we follow, don't even think about. Like giving out your ID to a bouncer, like that bouncer oftentimes follows that girl to their home, because now they see their address. Like, or like in the UK, that could be the case. Maybe not in the US. but like that happens, but that never happened to me.
The
Yeah.
apps we install in our phone, that where we give away exact location information. We don't realize that Billy, who works at the other end and is on the back end of that app, is now getting that woman's location data. And Billy might not necessarily be a good person. So we don't quite, we think of these faceless corporations as collecting our data, don't realize there are real people on the other end of this. There are some horror stories of places like ADT installing video cameras in people's homes. But again, you've got George, who works at ADT, who starts taking note of all of the, attractive female customers. He installs cameras in, then starts just spying on them in their homes, collecting nude photos. And, that's just one of the cases we heard about, because he ended up, whatever his name was, ended up getting fired, and I think they were sued because of it. But this stuff happens all the time, and we have to stop thinking about all this data collection as happening in this vacuum just with machines and no human ever touches it. No, you have developers on the back end of these apps who get access to this data and who do weaponize it, and we all need to be aware of that. And you're absolutely right that women are often on the receiving end of a lot of that brutality. So I think spreading the word to all audiences is essential.
Thank you very much for all of your beautiful messages and everything that you do. It's absolutely essential. You're doing such an important work. If you ever decide to bail out, please don't do what Michael Bazell did and leave it up for everyone else to consume even after you don't want to contribute anymore. Please.
Yeah, I mean, just a parting word. I would say that when people do leave this space, I don't blame them, because I understand how much flack people get when they put themselves out there. I'm sure you do too. I can't imagine what kind of comments and things you get on the back end. I certainly get my share, and I would presume that people like Michael Basil got his share as well, where I hear about these people who put their content out there for free, who just give all of their energy to advancing a cause or doing research, and all they get is hate mail, and all they get is people telling them how they should have done better, how disgusting their practices are because they missed one data point, what terrible people they are. For example, I got a slew of emails. I presume someone mentioned me on some Reddit thread or whatever about my website. Apparently it was using Google fonts or something. I mean, goddamn, I don't pay any attention to my website. It's the worst website in the world. I put all my effort into the content, into my videos. But I got a slew of hate mail, and I'm not just talking about people saying, hey Naomi, did you know that you're using Google fonts and we don't like Google, or maybe you should change them and here's how. I was getting a slew of hate mail saying how terrible a human I was, how my practices did not map what I was preaching, how I'm clearly a sham, just all of this stuff. It was relentless. So I don't blame anyone who's you know what, screw you guys, I'm going home. If they want to bow out and just be I'm not dealing with this, I imagine there are a lot of creators out there who are probably in a similar position where that's the stance that they take. I won't make any presumptions about that's why certain people have left the space, but I would presume that's going on. So I would just say as parting words, if you're part of this community and you hear people say something that's not false or not true or whatever, or you think they could be said better, or let's help people write a better message. Let's not just slam people as a way of being morally superior and make ourselves feel better because we got one up on that famous content creator. Let's give them better advice. Let's help them shape a better message. I think if we can get behind this movement and see the ways that we can support other people who are taking the time to create this educational material and support them in their efforts, I think we're all going to go a lot further. So that would just kind of be my parting thought.
All right. I gotta admit that you changed my mind. If you decide to leave and you delete your whole content, I'm going to respect that, because you're absolutely right.
Well, I'm not going anywhere, so I don't plan to go anywhere right now. I've got a lot more videos, a backlog of them, in fact, that I plan to release.
That's great. That's great to hear. Thank you very much. And yeah, go ahead.
I was just going to say thank you for having me. This has been a lot of fun.
Yeah, great fun. Have a good one.
All right, thanks.